My name's Kaylee, and today we're going to look into one of the world's most mysterious books, why so many scientists and scholars have been obsessed about it, and what we do know about the Voynich Manuscript, a very old codex that hasn't been deciphered. During the First and Second World War, the best codebreakers and cryptographers have worked tirelessly to figure out what was written in it, without success. Countless cryptologists, linguistics, astronomers, and even computer programs have tried to decipher the manuscript, and although many deciphering claims have been made in the past 100 years, it remains a mystery. So the story goes that the manuscript appeared and disappeared many times throughout history. For instance, it popped up in the library of the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II, and in 1912 it was bought at the Villa Mondragone in Italy by Polish book dealer Wilfrid Voynich. He kept the book to himself until he presented it to the world in 1915. The mysterious book has been named after Wilfrid Voynich after he died of lung cancer in New York in 1930. After his passing, his wife Ethel became the owner of the book, and eventually through Anne Nill, the codex got into the possession of Hans P. Krauss, who later donated the manuscript to Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, where it remains until this day. The codex has been studied quite a bit over the years. It's 23.5 centimeters by 16.2 centimeters, and it's 5 centimeters thick, and it contains hundreds of parchment pages. The manuscript's pages are made of vellum, which is prepared animal skin, usually calfskin, and sometimes it's called membrane. It contains approximately 240 pages that are collected in 18 quires, although it used to contain 20 quires and approximately 272 pages. Many of these were most likely already missing by the time Wilfrid Voynich purchased it. Researchers found this out when they looked at the page numbers and quire numbers. The manuscript has an unknown amount of fold-out pages. The exact number of these fold-outs depend on how they are counted, since they're quite unusual. For almost a century, the people were very divided on the manuscript. Was it really that old, or was it a fake? Was it created by Wilfrid Voynich to get attention? In 2009, researchers finally figured it out. They took samples from various parts of the codex and radiocarbon dated these. All these results were consistent, and they were able to indicate a date for the parchment to have been created somewhere between 1404 and 1438. In 2014, researchers went a step further and did some protein testing to find out from which animal this parchment was made. And they found out that at least 14 or maybe even 15 entire calfskins were used to make this parchment, which was created with care and unwritten before its usage in this codex. The binding and covers made from goatskin turned out to not be original to the book. This was added later before the manuscript found its way into the hands of Voynich. On the first 4 and last 4 pages of the current order of the manuscript, researchers have found insect holes. They have suggested that it used to have a wooden cover before the goatskin cover replaced it. The ink and paint used in the codex are for sure dating from the time period of the early 1400s and were created from materials expected from that period of time in Central Europe. A computer scientist named George Stolfi of the University of Campinas found out that parts of the text and drawings were retouched using a darker ink over a faint earlier text. The book is divided by 6 genres. By far the largest collection within the manuscript is the herbal section, followed by the pharmaceutical section, which is closely followed by the recipe, astronomical, and balneological sections. The smallest is the cosmological section. These sections, of course, are divided in these 6 parts because of the illustrations found in them, since the text itself can't be read. The herbal section has illustrations of 1 or 2 plants and a couple paragraphs of text per page. None of the plants being depicted are identifiable or known plants. The format of this section is typical of the European herbalists at the time when this manuscript was written. The pharmaceutical section shows many drawings of plant parts, like for instance the roots or leaves. It shows depictions of objects that are most likely apothecary jars, mostly mundane ones, but some of them are outright fantastical. There are only a few text paragraphs in this entire section. In the astronomical section, there are depictions of diagrams that resemble astronomy and/or astrology with suns, moons, and stars. There is a series of 12 diagrams that depict symbols that could be perceived as the zodiacal constellations. Each of these symbols have 30 at least partially nude female figures, each holding a star, who are arranged in 2 concentric bands or more. 2 pages of the series have been lost. These are Capricorn and Aquarius. Aries and Taurus, on the other hand, are split into 4 paired diagrams. They have 15 women and stars each. The balneological section is comprised of dense continuous text with small nude female figurines. Some of these figurines wear crowns and they are bathing in pools connected by a network of pipes. It forms a quite integrated design. Water flows from one page to the next. The cosmological section has many obscure circular diagrams, and one part of this section is a fold-out spanning 6 pages. This is called the Rosette's folio. It contains a map with 9 islands connected by causeways containing castles and what seems to be a volcano as well. And lastly, there is a recipe section. It has full pages of many short paragraphs. Each one is marked with a star on the left. At a first glance, it seems like this manuscript is a pharmacopoeia, addressing topics from medieval and early modern medicine. But after taking a closer look, knowing it's written in an unknown language, depicting unidentifiable plants, the reasons for this manuscript existing become less clear very quickly. When focusing on the plant drawings, one can figure out that most of the plants in the manuscript seem to have been created by combining different parts of different plants together. Wilfrid Voynich had suspected that the author of the manuscript was 13th century Roger Bacon, who was an English medieval philosopher and regarded as a wizard. This suspicion came from letters found in the manuscript that speculated Roger Bacon to be the author. Voynich tried his best to confirm this, but he also contemplated the author to be Albertus Magnus, a German philosopher and bishop. Because of the letter and the assumption that Roger Bacon had written the manuscript, he concluded that John Dee must have sold the manuscript to Rudolf II, Holy Roman Emperor. John Dee was an astronomer, astrologer, occultist and alchemist who worked at the court of Queen Elizabeth I of England. He was known to have owned a large collection of manuscripts from Bacon. John Dee lived with occultist and spirit medium Edward Kelly for several years. For a while it was suspected that either John Dee or Edward Kelly had written the manuscript and had written the letter trying to make it look like it was a valuable book from Roger Bacon, as a lost book of Bacon would have been worth quite the fortune. This, however, wasn't the only suspicion about the origins of the manuscript. In the early 1400s, there was an Italian engineer that created fantastical illustrations. His name was Giovanni Fontana. He was aware of cryptography and had used it in his books as a simple cipher. But his used cipher does not resemble the Voynich script. For a long time, people were suspicious of Wilfrid Voynich for creating the manuscript himself. Because he was an antique book dealer, he would have at least had the knowledge and means to do so. The letters found within the manuscript did indeed speak about the existence of a lost manuscript by Bacon, but there's no actual evidence that the Voynich manuscript is the one mentioned in the letters. The suspicion people had was that these letters would have been the reason for Voynich fabricating the manuscript. Thankfully, the radiocarbon dating of the parchment ruled out any possibility of this manuscript being a forgery, as it is very unbelievable that the unused pages from one single source created from 14 entire calfskins could have survived from the early 1400s. One of the writers of the letters found within the manuscript was Raphael Miniszewski, who had worked under Rudolf II, Holy Roman Emperor. Miniszewski was a writer and known cryptographer, and he claimed he had written an uncrackable cipher. Of course, this led to speculation of him being the author of the Voynich manuscript as a demonstration of his cipher. He is also the source of the Roger Bacon story. We do know that some of the text in the manuscript is in Latin script, although this is very few and far in between. The text in the manuscript is written from left to right. Most of the characters are made from 1 or 2 simple pen strokes. The text is comprised from 20 to 25 different characters, and there is no indication for any punctuation. There have been transcription alphabets, such as the extensible Voynich alphabet created as shown here. The first one was created by a study group led by William F. Friedman in the 1940s. There have been scholars who have found more correlations between the Voynich script and the Mandarin Chinese pinyin text than with any European languages. William Friedman's wife Elizabeth was also a cryptanalyst, and she described the unusual frequency of the characters as doomed to utter frustration. On one hand, it seems like the manuscript is written in an unknown language, but some scholars have suggested it has been written in a cipher or code. Many different types of ciphers have been used to try and decipher the book, although this yielded no results. Of course, this led to the suggestion that the manuscript is a 15th century hoax, and many hoax theories have been created over time. In 2007, Austrian researcher Andreas Schinner supported the hoax theory, showing that the statistical properties of the text were more consistent with meaningless gibberish than being an actual language. But of course, there are many scholars who claim that the texts seem too sophisticated to be a hoax. Algorithms have been created in hope to one day solve this mystery. There are those that have made claims that this manuscript is a glossolalia, otherwise known as speaking in tongues or channeling. If this is the case, the writer may have suddenly felt compelled to write the large amount of text in a short amount of time. Possibly because the writer heard voices or felt a sudden urge to write down a stream of consciousness. This theory has been supported because of the similarities between the Voynich Manuscript and St. Hildegard von Bingen's script and illustrations she created during severe migraines. Migraines can induce a trance-like state which is possible to resemble glossolalia. The most notable correlations between the two are the streams of stars and nymphs in the balneological section. Of course, just as all other theories and claims, it is impossible to prove or disprove any of them. These are all plausibilities. At least 10 different people have claimed in the past 100 years to have deciphered the manuscript and solved the mystery. None of these claims have been verified or proven to be true. As recent as 2019, news broke that the manuscript had been deciphered by Gerard Cheshire, a biology research assistant at the University of Bristol. He claimed to have deciphered the book within 2 weeks using a combination of lateral thinking and ingenuity. On the University of Bristol's website, this claim was written out, and the university quickly removed the reference from the site due to concerns about the validity of the research, stating, "This research was entirely the author's own work and is not affiliated with the University of Bristol, the School of Arts, nor the Centre for Medieval Studies." In June 2020, Gerard Cheshire published his translations of 10 pages that seem to be from the herbal section. There are high-resolution digital scans made publicly available by the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, along with scholarly essays for anyone interested in trying to figure it out for themselves. The link is in the description down below for anyone who would like to take a look at it and maybe try to crack the code themselves. But with that said, you've reached the end of this video. If you enjoyed watching, then don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you'd like to see more of these kind of videos and click the bell icon for notifications every time I upload. If you haven't seen my previous videos yet, then click the card in the upper right corner or click the link in the description down below. I'd also like to thank my Patreons, Richard, Barry, Floyd, Scott, James and NGC6543. And with that said, I'll see you in the next one. Worked tirelessly to figure out what was written in it without success.